One of the biggest mistakes people make when dealing with someone who has an avoidant attachment style is this: they chase. They push. They lean in when the other person is clearly leaning out, and on the surface it feels like the right thing to do. You care. You're invested. You want to fix it, reconnect, clarify. You want to get back to that moment where it all felt safe and good. But here's the psychological truth that most people miss. For someone who leans avoidant, closeness feels like pressure. It feels like suffocation, even if there's no logical reason. And the more they sense you're trying to pull them back into emotional intensity, the faster they retreat. Now, I'm not saying they don't care. That's a misconception. Avoidants do care. Deeply. But they've built emotional mechanisms, defense systems, really, that tell them closeness equals vulnerability, and vulnerability equals danger. That's a hardwired belief formed early, often in childhood, when emotional intimacy was either inconsistent, unsafe, or simply unavailable. So when someone with an avoidant style pulls away, it's not necessarily a reflection of your worth or your value. It's a reflection of their nervous system doing what it was trained to do: protect them from perceived emotional risk. This is where most people get it completely wrong. They think if they just say the right thing, send the right text, explain their side, offer more love, more reassurance, that'll fix it. That'll bring them back. But what actually works is counterintuitive. You have to stop chasing. You have to lean back, not out of manipulation or strategy, but because that space, that breath, that moment of silence is the only thing that feels emotionally safe to them. I want to be really clear: space is not the absence of love. It's not rejection. It's not giving up. It's an offering. You're essentially saying, I respect your need for distance and I won't make you feel trapped or cornered. I care enough to give you what you're not able to ask for. That changes everything. Why? Because when you remove the emotional pressure, when you stop chasing the connection, you stop triggering their need to escape. And for the first time, they're left alone with themselves, not with your emotional energy barreling toward them. They have space to reflect, to miss you, to reconsider, to feel safe enough to approach. And listen, this isn't easy. When someone you love pulls away, the most human response is panic. We think, if I don't act now, I'll lose them forever. But the truth is, clinging tighter rarely prevents loss. It usually guarantees it. What brings someone back isn't your effort. It's the energy behind your effort. If that energy is anxious, grasping, controlling, even if it's dressed up as love, they feel it, and it repels them. It confirms their fear that closeness will cost them their autonomy. Avoidants don't come back because you convince them. They come back because something inside of them felt safe to do so. They come back when they sense you're no longer a source of emotional pressure. When your energy says, I'm good either way, I want this, but I don't need to control it, that's powerful. That's attractive. That's what flips the script. There's also a philosophical layer to this. We're so trained in this culture to think that love means holding on, but real love, mature love, sometimes means letting go. Not out of defeat, but out of strength. It's saying, I love you enough to give you freedom. I love myself enough to stay rooted while you figure out your path. And here's the paradox: the very act of letting go often becomes the bridge back. Not because you were playing games, but because you honored their need for distance without making it about your own fear. And here's where the psychological depth really kicks in. When you stop chasing an avoidant, you're not just giving them space, you're giving the space, you're giving yourself space too. Space to recalibrate your own nervous system, space to confront your own attachment patterns, space to stop being so externally focused on their next move and start turning inward. That pause is where growth happens. That's where you learn to self-soothe, to ground yourself, to become the version of you that doesn't just attract them back, but who doesn't need them back to feel whole. It's not easy, but it's the work. It's the deep, uncomfortable, real work that changes relationships, not from the outside, but from the outside bottom. And when you do it, you're not just changing your relationship with one avoidant person, you're rewriting the entire way you relate to intimacy, to connection, to yourself. Equals more love. Instead, create the space where love can actually breathe. Pull your energy back with dignity, not resentment. Stand still, grounded, and let the silence speak for you. Because sometimes what makes someone return isn't what you said, it's what you didn't say. Let's dive into something that's often overlooked but absolutely crucial: regulating your own emotions first. When you're in a relationship with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, it's easy to get caught up in the whirlwind of emotions: anxiety, frustration, confusion. You want to fix things, you want answers, and often that emotional turmoil drives your behavior. But here's the thing: your emotional state is not just a private matter. It's a signal, a force, an energy that shapes the entire interaction. And with avoidance, that energy can either open a door or slam it shut faster than you realize. Avoidants tend to have a hypersensitivity to emotional intensity. Not in the way you might think, where they feel every feeling deeply, but in the way their nervous systems are wired to interpret emotional expressions as potential threats to their autonomy and safety. So when you come at them with anxiety, desperation, or high reactivity, their instinct is to shut down, distance themselves, or disappear. This isn't about being cold or uncaring, it's about self-preservation on their part. It's their way of saying, I need to protect myself from this emotional storm, and no matter how justified your feelings are, if you are storming emotionally, you're fueling their need to escape. This is where the power of emotional regulation comes into play, and not just as a nice to have, but as an essential tool in creating a bridge back to connection. Emotional regulation isn't about suppressing your feelings or pretending everything's fine. It's about recognizing your emotions, feeling them fully, and then responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. It means training yourself to pause, to breathe, to ground yourself, even when the urge to lash out, plead, or overwhelm is at its strongest. Think about it like this: your emotions are like the weather. You can't control the weather itself, you can't stop a storm from coming, but you can decide whether you carry an umbrella or stand exposed. When you learn to carry your own emotional umbrella, you protect your relationship from getting drenched in chaos. You create a climate where your avoidant partner can feel safe enough to step outside without fearing they'll get soaked in emotional intensity. Philosophically, this is about cultivating emotional sovereignty. It's about not letting your happiness, your sense of security, your sense of worth be dictated entirely by someone else's presence or absence. When your emotional state depends on whether they show up or pull away, you're giving away your power. You're handing over the keys to your peace of mind, but when you regulate yourself first, you reclaim those keys. You stand in your own power, grounded and clear. This isn't just some airy-fairy self-help idea. It's grounded in neuroscience. Studies show that emotional regulation activates the prefrontal cortex, the thinking, rational part of your brain, and helps inhibit the amygdala, which is the brain's alarm center responsible for the fight-or-flight response. When you respond from the prefrontal cortex, you're more likely to make choices that foster connection instead of triggering avoidance. Let's bring this down to a practical example. Imagine you get a text from your avoidant partner that feels cold or distant. Your first impulse might be to respond immediately with anxiety or frustration, maybe asking why they're distant, begging for reassurance, or over-explaining yourself. But this kind of response doesn't soothe anyone. It puts their nervous system on high alert. Instead, imagine if you take a step back. You feel the emotional sting, acknowledge it, but choose not to react right away. You take a deep breath. Remind yourself that their distance isn't a personal attack, and craft a message from a place of calm, not chaos. That small shift in your internal state completely changes the dynamic. Over time, this consistent emotional regulation rewires your relationship patterns. Instead of creating emotional storms that push them away, you create emotional calm that draws them in. It becomes a silent language of safety and trust. And here's the kicker: it also improves your own mental health and resilience. You stop feeling like a victim of your circumstances and start feeling like the author of your emotional life. But let's be honest, this is not easy. It's uncomfortable to sit with your feelings without acting on them immediately. It takes practice to develop this muscle of self-regulation. And if your own attachment style is anxious or reactive, this work is even more critical. It means learning new ways to soothe yourself, to ground yourself, to hold your own hand through the storm. And this work has ripple effects. When you regulate your emotions first, you model what healthy emotional processing looks like. This is powerful because avoidants often haven't had that modeled for them consistently in their past relationships. By embodying calm and clarity, you become a safe harbor. You become the stability they unconsciously crave but fear. The irony is that when you stop reacting emotionally to their distance, you actually increase your chances of reconnecting. Why? Because the absence of emotional pressure invites curiosity. It breaks the pattern of chase and retreat. It creates a new rhythm, one where they can approach on their own terms, feeling safe rather than threatened. So what's the takeaway here? Your emotional regulation isn't just about you. It's the foundation of the entire process of reconnecting with an avoidant partner. It's the quiet strength beneath the visible actions. It's what transforms desperation into dignity, chaos into calm, and fear into trust. In the end, the path forward isn't about convincing them to come back with frantic messages or endless pleas. It's about becoming the person who can hold their own emotional space steady enough to allow the relationship to breathe. It's about mastering your internal weather so that when they peek out from their shelter, they see calm skies instead of storms. Remember this: you cannot control their distance, but you can control how you show up emotionally. When you do that, you shift from being reactive to being magnetic. You step into your own power, and in that space, true connection becomes possible. So take a breath, center yourself, stand firm in your own emotional sovereignty. Because this work is not just the key to bringing them back, it's the key to creating a relationship where both of you can truly thrive. When we talk about reconnecting with someone who has an avoidant attachment style, there's a fundamental truth that changes everything. You cannot force a return. This isn't about giving up or surrendering hope. It's about shifting your mindset from control to influence, and that distinction is enormous. Control is an illusion, influence is a reality, and understanding this difference is the cornerstone of rebuilding any meaningful connection. Let me explain what I mean. Control is about trying to manipulate outcomes. It's the desire to dictate someone else's choices, emotions, and actions. When we're in pain or feeling uncertain, that urge to control can become overwhelming. We want to pull them back, to make them stay, to stop the distance. But the harder you try to control, the more you trigger resistance, especially with avoidance. Their nervous system is designed to detect control as a threat, an infringement on their autonomy, and autonomy is sacred for them. It's the invisible line that, if crossed, makes them pull away faster and farther. Influence, on the other hand, is about something much more subtle and powerful. It's about owning your energy, your behavior, your mindset, and trusting that by becoming your best self, you naturally invite others into connection. Influence comes from a place of self-assuredness, not neediness. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows their worth and refuses to shrink or chase to get it validated. Influence is an inside-out process. You change you, and the relationship changes in response. Philosophically, this is rooted in the ancient wisdom of sovereignty, the idea that true power comes from mastery over oneself, not over others. You can't command the wind, but you can adjust your sails. You can't force someone's heart, but you can become the person whose heart is irresistible, not because you're desperate, but because you're grounded. So what does this look like practically? It means shifting focus away from how do I get them back, and toward how do I become someone worth coming back to? That subtle change in language and intention has profound effects. When you start working on your own emotional health, your self-esteem, your boundaries, and your goals independent of the other person, you become magnetic in a way that no amount of chasing can replicate. Here's the truth: people, especially avoidants, are drawn to authenticity and strength. They are wired to pull away from intensity and neediness, but are often intrigued and comforted by confidence. When you stop trying to steer their ship and instead navigate your own waters, you create a dynamic where they can come to you freely, without pressure. There's also a psychological angle here that's worth unpacking. Avoidant attachment isn't just a personality quirk, it's a defense mechanism developed from early relational experiences where vulnerability was unsafe or unrewarding. So avoidants are not just protecting themselves from you, they're protecting themselves from a perceived internal threat of engulfment or loss of self. Your attempts to control or chase can unintentionally validate their fears, making them retreat even more. By focusing on influence, you rewrite the script. You signal, I am whole, I am secure, I am not here to trap you, but I am here in my own right. That message conveyed through your calm demeanor, your steady boundaries, your emotional independence breaks the cycle of fear and avoidance. This doesn't mean becoming cold or distant. It means being authentically yourself, but with a clear line around what you will and won't accept. Boundaries are a form of self-respect, and they also communicate respect for the other person's autonomy. When avoidants sense you're not desperate to be entangled, but instead grounded in your own life, they feel safer to explore closeness. Let me share a small but powerful example. Imagine you've been texting or calling, and the other person is pulling away, giving minimal responses or none at all. The control mindset screams, I have to get a response. I have to know what's going on. But the influence mindset says, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to focus on my own well-being, my work, my friends, my passions. I'm going to show up as someone who has a full life, whether or not they engage. That shift is magnetic. It's a statement of independence that ironically invites closeness because it removes pressure. There's also a deeper philosophical insight here. Attachment and love are not about possession, but about freedom. Trying to control someone's return is like trying to hold water in your fist. It slips through and your hand closes in vain. But when you open your hand, you hold the water gently and let it flow naturally. Influence is that open hand, firm, present, but not grasping. And this is empowering because it means you're not at the mercy of someone else's choices. You become the author of your own story. You stop waiting for their validation to feel complete. And paradoxically, that's when true connection becomes possible. In essence, embracing influence over control is an invitation to grow into the person you were always meant to be, one who commands respect through presence, not pressure. It's about cultivating a magnetic energy that says, I am here, I am whole, I am worthy, and I will not settle for less. So here's the final thought to carry with you. The power to change your relationship doesn't lie in controlling their steps, but in mastering your own. Influence is not about pushing or pulling, it's about standing firm in your own light and trusting that the right people and the right timing will come closer because of it. Remember, you cannot force a return, but you can become so irresistibly grounded that they want to come back, not out of obligation, but out of genuine desire. And that kind of connection is worth every ounce of the work. There's a strategy that often comes up when people talk about reconnecting with avoidance, going no contact, or using silence as a tool. But I want to be really clear about something important here. Strategic silence only works when it's genuine. It's not a game. It's not a manipulation tactic. It's a state of being. And understanding that difference changes everything. When someone who is avoidant feels chased or pressured, their instinct is to withdraw. That's their natural defense mechanism, kicking and pulling back to protect themselves from emotional overwhelm. So if you're constantly reaching out, trying to explain, pleading for connection, what you're actually doing is intensifying their need to escape. It's like trying to hold water in your hands. It slips away faster the tighter you grip. But here's the paradox. When you stop chasing, when you really step back and practice genuine detachment, you create a space that invites them to return. This space is not emptiness or abandonment. It's a vacuum where curiosity, reflection, and longing can grow. It's the calm after the storm, where they can finally breathe and reconsider without pressure. And this isn't just about silence as a tactic, it's about detachment as a mindset. Detachment means you're not emotionally invested in the outcome to the point of losing yourself. It means you respect their autonomy enough to let go of control, even if it hurts. It means you're centered enough in your own worth that you don't need constant validation from them. This is a profound psychological shift. Philosophically, detachment aligns with ancient teachings about non-attachment, not in the sense of being cold or indifferent, but in the sense of loving without clinging. It's about holding someone gently with an open hand rather than gripping tightly out of fear. When you detach in this way, you create a powerful energetic signal that says, I am here, I care, but I am not defined by your presence or absence. This mindset does something vital. It removes the emotional pressure that triggers avoidant withdrawal. Avoidants are wired to interpret pressure as threat. When you stop providing that pressure, when your silence isn't manipulative but authentic, it diffuses the threat and lowers their defenses. Suddenly, they have room to show up not because they feel cornered, but because they feel safe. Now, let me be clear, this doesn't mean you ignore your feelings or pretend everything is fine when it's not. Detachment is not denial. It's an active process of self-care and self-respect. It means you honor your emotions, but you don't let those emotions drive frantic or desperate behaviors that push the other person away. And the beauty of genuine detachment is that it changes the dynamic entirely. Instead of you chasing and them fleeing, it becomes a dance where they can step closer on their own terms. It's an invitation for them to meet you in a space of calm and respect rather than panic and need. Let's think about the psychology here. When avoidants retreat, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting the feeling of being overwhelmed or trapped. Your frantic attempts to reconnect, while understandable, often amplify that feeling. But when you hold your ground with calm detachment, you demonstrate emotional maturity. You show that you can withstand distance without losing yourself, and that is incredibly disarming to someone who fears engulfment. There's also a neuroscience aspect to this. When you act from a place of calm detachment, your nervous system signals safety. The vagus nerve, the key player in our parasympathetic system, engages and helps regulate stress responses. When you're calm, you literally create an environment where connection can flourish. When you're anxious or desperate, you activate fight or flight responses that make connection nearly impossible. This is why strategic silence, when done authentically, can lead to unexpected breakthroughs. It allows avoidants to reflect, to feel the absence without fear, and often to miss what was there. It gives them the mental and emotional space to process their own fears and defenses rather than reacting to your emotional energy. But here's the catch. This only works if the silence is authentic. If you're using silence as a manipulation tool, waiting, watching, hoping for a reaction, that energy comes through loud and clear. Avoidants pick up on it, and it feels like another form of control or pressure, just less obvious. They retreat again, sometimes even farther. True detachment means you're fully present with yourself, fully engaged in your own growth and well-being, regardless of what they do. It means you're not waiting around hoping for a text or a call. You're living your life fully and richly, and in doing so, you create a magnetic energy that is irresistible. Philosophically, this touches on the idea that true connection can only happen between two whole people. You cannot fix, complete, or save another person. You can only show up as your whole, grounded self, and that presence invites others, not forces them to come closer. So if you're struggling with the pull to reach out, to explain, to fix, pause, ask yourself, is this coming from a place of authentic detachment or desperate need? If it's the latter, step back. Give yourself permission to breathe, to hold space, and to trust the process. Remember, silence isn't absence when it's filled with self-respect and presence. It's a powerful form of communication that says, I am enough. I am whole. I am here waiting, but not chasing. And that kind of energy doesn't just bring people back, it brings the right kind of people back. So here's the takeaway. Genuine detachment isn't about giving up, it's about giving space for true connection to emerge. When you stop chasing and start holding space, you create the conditions for avoidance to return, not out of obligation, but out of their own desire to reconnect. That is the transformative power of silence done right. In the end, remember this, the most profound way to bring someone back is to first bring yourself home to your own center, your own seat. When you do that, silence becomes your strongest voice and love becomes a space of freedom, not fear. When it comes to reconnecting with someone who is an avoidant attachment style, one of the most underestimated and powerful elements is the art of patience paired with realistic expectations. It's tempting to want quick fixes, to crave immediate results and rapid reconciliation, but the truth is, change of this nature is slow, delicate, and deeply personal. This is a process, not a project, and the way you hold space for that process can make all the difference between real healing and repeated heartbreak. Avoidant attachment didn't develop overnight, and it certainly won't dissolve overnight. It's rooted in early experiences, often from childhood, where emotional needs weren't consistently met, or where independence became a shield against vulnerability and pain. This means their patterns of distancing, retreating, and self-protection are deeply ingrained survival mechanisms. So when you expect a sudden turnaround, you're setting yourself up for frustration and disappointment. Philosophically, this reminds me of the principle of natural growth, like a tree that takes years to develop roots strong enough branches. You can't force a sapling to grow faster without damaging its potential. Similarly, forcing an avoidant partner to open up too soon or too much risks snapping the fragile roots of trust and safety that need to grow first. Patience here isn't passive waiting, it's active presence. It's the discipline of showing up emotionally steady consistently without rushing or pressuring. It means cultivating your own internal resilience so that the pace of the other person's progress doesn't destabilize your well-being. You learn to live fully in the present moment, appreciating small shifts rather than demanding leaps. This takes psychological maturity because it challenges our natural human impulse for certainty and control. We want to know, when will this get better, or how long until they come back fully? But attachment by nature is messy and unpredictable. The most profound connections emerge not from certainty, but from trust in yourself, in the process, and in the other person's capacity to grow. In fact, realistic expectations act as a kind of emotional firewall against the disappointment that often arises when we expect too much too soon. When you expect someone to change overnight, every moment of avoidance or withdrawal feels like a failure. But when you hold space for gradual progress, every small sign of connection, every brief moment of vulnerability becomes a victory, a building block, rather than a setback. And patience also means being prepared for the possibility that the relationship might not look the same as it once did. It might evolve into a different form, less intense, more balanced, maybe even less together in the traditional sense. But sometimes that evolution is the very thing that allows for genuine connection and sustainability. It's a reminder that growth often involves change, and change can be a form of healing, not loss. There's also a philosophical depth here about embracing uncertainty, avoidance, fear, engulfment, losing themselves in relationships. When you hold patient, realistic expectations, you're acknowledging that true intimacy requires time to build trust, safety, and mutual respect. You're learning to sit with ambiguity rather than rushing to resolve it. This is a profound lesson in itself, not just about relationships, but about life. On a practical level, patience means letting go of the narrative that your value depends on their timeline. You keep cultivating your own life, your passions, your friendships, your growth without waiting for them to catch up. This shifts your identity from being someone in limbo to someone actively living and evolving regardless of external circumstances. At the same time, realistic expectations also mean knowing the difference between hope and denial. It's hopeful to believe in growth and change. It's denial to ignore clear red flags or to stay stuck in patterns that harm your well-being. Patience is not a license for tolerance of abuse or neglect. It's a disciplined, grounded choice to allow space for transformation when it's healthy and possible. And here's an essential insight: the longer you can maintain that patient, steady presence without sacrificing your own needs, the more you build a foundation of trust that invites avoidance to come closer on their own terms. It creates a rhythm where closeness and distance coexist without panic or pressure, a dance rather than a chase. In many ways, patience is the quiet hero of any healing relationship. It's invisible, slow, and often unappreciated, but it's the soil in which deep, lasting connection can take root. Without it, all the strategies and tactics in the world are just noise against the backdrop of unresolved fears and unmet needs. So how do you cultivate this patience? It starts with self-awareness. Notice when impatience or frustration arise and use that as a signal to return to your center, to breathe, to ground yourself, and to remind yourself of the bigger picture. Practice mindfulness to anchor yourself in the present. Keep your expectations flexible, like water adapting to the shape of the container it's in. Also, surround yourself with support, friends, therapy, communities that help you stay balanced and hopeful without getting lost in anxious projections. Remember, this isn't a journey you take alone. Connection, ironically, often requires connection. Ultimately, patience and realistic expectations teach us to honor the complexity of human nature. We are not machines that respond to commands. We are beings shaped by history, emotion, and unconscious fears. To heal and reconnect with someone who is avoidant means respecting that complexity and honoring the pace at which trust and intimacy unfold. Let me leave you with this: patience is not the absence of action, it is the highest form of action. It is the deliberate choice to create space for transformation, to hold love without suffocation, and to trust that in time what is meant to grow will flourish. When you embrace this, you move from desperation to dignity, from fixation to freedom. And in that freedom, true connection becomes not just possible but inevitable.